Hi folks, my name's Jem, I'm the Crazy Pigeon Lady, and it's my mission to entertain, educate and inspire you with all things pigeon and dove. Welcome back to this, my Pigeons as Pets Beginner's Guide series, which is designed for people keeping domesticated pigeon, the species Columba livia, as a pet indoors, although much of the advice I offer here is relevant to other species of pigeons and doves commonly kept as pets. So this is episode 9, where I'll be talking about bird safety, including general precautions for bird safety, typical hazards you might encounter around your home that could affect your pet pigeon. I want to emphasise at this point in this video that I won't possibly be able to cover every conceivable danger or risk that there might be to your bird, so it's important for you to be generally vigilant and to remember that pigeons aren't humans. They don't necessarily understand human environments in the same way that we do, or understand what's dangerous and what isn't. They're also a lot smaller than us, and their bodies are a lot more delicate. So whilst pet pigeons are generally a lot safer indoors compared to wild birds, who obviously have to encounter the dangers of predators and humans and traffic and things like that, the home environment is not completely without risk, so there are some dangers there. If you've never had a pet bird before, then you won't necessarily realise or be aware of the dangers, although if you have kept birds before, then you'll have some experience in this area. So whilst pigeons are not like common other bird pets like hookbills, parrots, parakeets and so forth, they are still intelligent and curious, so they will still want to explore and move around their environment, and therein could encounter some potential dangers. I'm having a good flap there, Anna. It's keeping me nice and cool here, it's a hot day. So some of the commonplace dangers to pigeons and doves kept as pets indoors are security issues, so things like open doors or open windows, other pets that you have in your home, chemicals, hazardous substances in the air, physical hazards around your home, and also potentially the risks of the outdoors if you choose to take or keep your birds outside, even if it's just temporary. So let's go through each of those areas then. So first of all, we'll talk about security. So obviously pet pigeons that are kept indoors aren't necessarily well adapted to wildlife. They don't necessarily understand how to find their own food, how to evade danger, predators, traffic and that sort of things. So an open door or an open window could potentially result in your bird escaping out of your home and ending up outside, which will be a dangerous environment that they are unprepared for. So it's important for you to think about this, about making sure that when your bird is free flying around your home, and of course they do need plenty of out of the cage time in your home, that you're making sure that your environment is secure and that external doors and windows are shut. That's not to say that you can't have doors and windows open. To some degree, it is very important to have lots of ventilation in your home for birds. So there are things you can do, things like shutters or fly screens or beaded curtains and things like that, that might allow you to have a door or a window open to a small degree, but in a safe way that means that the pigeon wouldn't necessarily be able to escape. So next I'll talk about the dangers of other pets. Now this is a little bit of a controversial area, if you like, and there's normally questions around whether it's right or wrong to keep birds around other animals. Now I don't see it as my role here to tell you what is right or wrong in respect of whether you must or must not keep a pet pigeon around your other pets, but it is my role to try to educate and inform so that you can make an informed decision about whether that is right for you, and more importantly whether it's right for your bird. So lots of people have cats and dogs. They might also have other small mammals, guinea pigs, rabbits and the like, or even other birds. Now, whilst many people happily keep pet pigeons and doves around other pets in the home, it's not entirely risk-free. You have to remember that animals like cats and dogs are essentially predators. So whilst they may have a very loving and gentle temperament, those instincts are still there, and even if they exhibit them in a way that's playful rather than aggressive, these animals are a lot larger and a lot heavier than your birds, and therefore even if your cat or your dog wants to play with your pigeon, there is still the risk there that they could hurt them, even if they don't intend to do them any real genuine harm. Other small mammals are probably unlikely to represent a huge amount of risk to your bird. In fact, the pigeon's probably more likely to be able to do damage to them than the other way around. Similarly with other birds can get on. Although if you do have a hookbill and the birds don't get on with your pigeons, it's worth remembering that a bite from a hook-billed bird is rather painful and would cause your pigeon a considerable amount of damage. So the watchword in all of these circumstances is vigilance. I really do recommend that you don't leave your birds with your other animals unsupervised. So that you can intervene if necessary, and make sure that you are watching and monitoring the interactions between your pigeons and other animals to make sure that everyone is staying safe. And certainly if you started to encounter some problems, then it's important to make sure that you separate your bird from your other animals and make sure that your pigeon or your dove has a safe environment in which that they can fly freely and interact with you in a way that's perhaps away from your other animals if that becomes necessary. I want to talk a moment about the interactions between pigeons and other doves, other Columbia species, particularly doves, because some people do like to keep these together and want to know about whether they are compatible. So most dove species that are kept as pets are things like diamond doves, spotted doves, collared doves, ringneck doves, that sort of thing. They are a lot smaller than pigeons, and also they aren't colony nesting or social in their nature, and therefore pigeons and doves that are housed together will sometimes end up in a degree of competition. Pigeons will want to assert themselves and their own territory over the space that they share with the doves, and therefore that assertion may involve a degree of aggression. Pigeons are much bigger than doves. These species are generally a lot smaller, and so it's entirely possible for a pigeon to cause a smaller dove quite a bit of damage in the process of doing what for a pigeon would be normal assertive behaviour that it would do to another pigeon. But to a dove that's much smaller and much more delicate, and certainly not in any way adept at fighting back, they could potentially get injured and possibly quite severely too. And so that you would need, if you were keeping these birds closely together, again, to monitor those interactions very carefully and certainly separate them if there was any aggression starting to happen. I'll move on next to talking about chemicals and hazardous substances. And whilst there are lots of chemicals that we use in our homes every day that aren't considered particularly hazardous to humans, there are a lot of things that we have in our homes that are hazardous to birds. And to understand why they're hazardous to birds for a moment, we have to talk about how birds breathe. So birds, particularly pigeons, who are very strong and powerful flyers in general, they have a different kind of breathing system to we do. So in addition to their lungs, they also have all sorts of air sacs, which means that every breath that they take, the oxygen, the gases that they take in, is exposed to a lot greater surface area of their body, which means for every breath that a bird takes, they can extract a lot more oxygen from each breath than we humans could. In fact, it's estimated that one bird breath might be equivalent to 2 human breaths in terms of the amount of oxygen transfer that happens. So when you think about it, if a bird breathes and there is a toxic chemical or substance, they are actually getting a high level of exposure and a high level of transfer of that chemical into their bloodstream for each breath that they take, compared to a human. And of course, birds' bodies are a lot smaller than ours, so for every cubic centimetre, or if you like, of chemical in the air, that's a much greater effect on the bird than it would be on the human body. So things we need to think about in our home environment that could potentially affect our birds is anything involving perfumes or sprays that atomizes in the air. So things like essential oils, particularly if you have things like scented candles, oil burners, diffusers, atomizers, anything that sprays scent into the air, products that we use and spray, hairspray, that kind of thing in the air, cleaning products, for example, that we use to clean our homes. All of these sorts of things You need to make sure that you are not using them when your bird is in the same room as you. Also, things like if you repaint your home, for example, making sure your birds are relocated to another part of the house, or maybe go and stay with someone that you trust for a day or so in order for the fumes to be fully aerated. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have lots of ventilation in your home, so to have doors and windows open wherever you can, with appropriate security measures if needed, to make sure that the air is getting circulated to move these things, these chemicals and anything in the air out and through your home. But perhaps one of the most significant dangers that people don't realise is the danger of Teflon. Now, Teflon, PTFE, polytetrafluoroethane, is a chemical that probably most of us have in our homes in some form or another, and it's the non-stick coating that you will find in things like cookware, everything from pans to roasting trays to grill pans to the inside of your oven, oven liners and lots of other products besides. And when this is heated to a very high temperature, it gives off invisible fumes into the atmosphere, which can be toxic to birds. And certainly the smaller your birds are, the bigger a problem that it is. Now, it is suggested that these fumes are only generally released at incredibly high temperatures, possibly even high temperatures that we would normally cook at. And also if the non-stick coating surface is damaged, perhaps it's cracked or blistered in some way, it's more likely to release these chemicals. But probably the biggest danger comes from the pyrolytic or the self-cleaning ovens, which run at about 900 degrees centigrade. When these are run on the self-cleaning setting, those fumes are released into the air because the surface inside the oven is heated to that incredibly high temperature. So if you do have pet birds in your home, very, very important to make sure that wherever possible that you are removing Teflon from the equation, these non-stick coatings, wherever you can. Lots of other options out there: ceramic cookware, stainless steel, copper, all of these sorts of different materials. I have stainless steel cookware in my home, for example. I don't have a self-cleaning oven. If you do have a little bit, then I would suggest using it in a way that's in a closed room. Your birds are definitely not in the environment where it's being used, and again, plenty of ventilation to get any fumes straight outside and away from your birds. And certainly don't, if you have a self-cleaning oven, don't run it while your birds are anywhere near it. There's also a suggestion that 3D printers may possibly give off some of these fumes. They may have some of this material inside them. It's a bit debatable about how much of that there is and how significant the fumes are, but again, if acting on the side of caution, you may want to make sure that you do not run any of these machines in the same room as your birds are, and again, make sure that you're using plenty of ventilation. I'll move on now to talking about physical hazards. So there are lots and lots of different things inside your home which could potentially present a hazard to your bird, and I'll talk about some of the typical ones, but again, you know, can't possibly talk about every hazard that you might encounter in your home, so it is important to be vigilant. The kitchen is kind of a big hazardous area for your bird. There's all sorts of things going on there, and it's probably a good idea to avoid having your pigeon in your kitchen anyway. It's where you prepare food and things like that, and pigeons do tend to want to get here, there and everywhere, and do like to drop poops from a great height, which of course you wouldn't want to get into your food or your food preparation surfaces. So generally, if you can avoid having your pigeon anywhere near the kitchen, that's generally a good idea. Any sources of heat, fires, heaters, radiators, that sort of thing. Again, making sure that you've got appropriate fire guards or radiator guards, or you have radiators turned down to a lower temperature, or you have a shelf or a cover or something on top. Just thinking about these things from the bird's point of view, making sure that they can't burn themselves. Sharp objects around the house. Pigeons do like to pick things up, particularly if they're sort of long or stick or twig-like. They like to pick them up as nesting material, particularly male birds. So you're thinking about things like pins or needles or cocktail sticks or anything that's small and sharp. Again, keeping an eye out and being vigilant for these sorts of things laying around the house. Small little things your pigeon could swallow, maybe a piece of broken glass or something sharp. Again, thinking about that sort of thing and making sure that you're checking and cleaning regularly, which you will certainly have to do if you have a bird. As I mentioned in the episode on cleaning and hygiene, vacuuming, lots and lots of vacuuming regularly. There will be other hazards around your home. Potentially you want to think about maybe hazards around the cage, so any sort of clips, wires or anything you're using to holding the shelves or the fixtures in the cage. Just think about them from the bird's point of view. Are they sharp? Do they have any loops that they could potentially get their head caught in, neck caught in, feet caught in? Worth checking the cage area and just making sure that whatever you're using to secure any fixtures in the cage is safe and not likely to result in any accidents. Finally, I'll talk lastly about the hazards of the outdoors. Now, whilst this series is mainly for pigeons being kept as pets indoors, you may occasionally want to take your birds outdoors, and certainly on a sunny day this would be a very nice thing to do. Allow them to get some fresh air, plenty of sunshine, good for their vitamin D, taking up the calcium with the use of that vitamin D, allowing them to have a little look around and things like that. It is a good experience for them. Some people also like to take their birds out for free flight or out on harness. Now, whilst these are good for your birds and there's lots and lots of benefits, like a lot of things, there's also a degree of risks too. So you need to think about taking appropriate precautions. If you put your birds outside in an outdoor cage, make sure it's secure, make sure it's not going to fall over or get blown over if there's a stiff breeze. Think about predators or other animals. For example, do you have foxes coming into your garden? Maybe other people's cats? Do you have a dog or a cat? Maybe you have some aerial predators, hawks and things like that are not above trying to attack birds that are in cages outside. So it's important to bear these things in mind and make sure that the area is safe and secure. And certainly don't leave your birds unattended. In fact, it's quite nice for you to sit outside in the garden. My birds are quite nervous about being outside. It's a bit of a foreign environment to them, all sorts of different sounds and sights and things like that. But they're generally much more relaxed if I sit out in the garden with them. And it's certainly a nice thing to do on a sunny day, is sit outside with your birds. Now, if you're taking your bird outside, not inside a cage, then again there's a little bit more risk involved in that. If you're using a flight harness, make sure that it's the correct size for your bird, make sure that all the fixings are secure, because if your bird is startled, for example, by a predator or a loud noise, they may very well want to bolt off instinctually. So you need to make sure that that harness is secure and that you are holding it tight. If you're taking your bird outside for free flight without a harness, then you need to be really, really confident that you have a secure attachment with your bird, a very strong bond and a good recall. And even if you have all of these things, if your bird is scared or spooked, they can certainly go bolting off in a direction and not respond to your recall, and that can happen. So you need to think about that if you're going to take your bird outside for free flight. If you're taking your birds outdoors on a harness or for free flight, do make sure that they are wearing proper identification, rings with clear contact details on, so if your bird did get lost and someone found it, that they can make sure that they get it back to you. So, in summary, I've covered some of the commonplace hazards to pet pigeons and doves that may occur inside your home. I haven't covered every possible danger that could exist to your bird, so it is important to be observant and vigilant inside your home and try to think about the environment from the bird's perspective and what could cause them danger or risk. Accidents can still happen even despite your best efforts, okay? Don't think badly of yourself if something does happen, even when you tried your best. I've done it myself. You do feel bad, but please don't feel bad. If you love your birds and you're doing the absolute best for them, accidents can still happen. So it's very, very important to make sure that if your bird requires medical attention from a vet, that you do make sure that they get that as soon as possible, and don't allow any feelings of embarrassment that you may have caused your bird some harm unintentionally to get in the way of making sure that your birds get the treatment that they need. Okay? Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you can be the next to hear about my next Crazy Pigeon Lady video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.